Really, really lovely to see you all here. It's really lovely to be on the urban retreat with you. I really love the urban retreat. I've been doing the urban retreat for a few years. I did the urban retreat when I first started coming to the centre, and it's so nice to start seeing the same faces throughout the week, particularly this week when we've got the co-working space next door as well. You're seeing the same faces all the way through the day, and really starting to get a sense of kind of living together as a community, in the midst of our other things that we're all doing as well. So we're sort of living our own separate lives, but really living together as well. Yeah, it's really, really lovely. So, this week, as part of these evening classes, we're going to be exploring Padmasambhava, the legend of Padmasambhava more fully. So Padmasambhava is the figure on our shrine there. We're going to be kind of telling this story between the five of us of how Padmasambhava brought Buddhism to Tibet. So the reason I wanted to say a little bit about why we're doing that, why are we talking about Padmasambhava, why are we talking about this figure from, I think it's the 8th century, so medieval times. Why are we talking about this strange figure who, has this kind of wrathful expression on his face, where his eyebrows look almost kind of angry at you, but he's still somehow smiling at you at the same time. This figure who holds this staff with 3 severed heads at various stages of, one's freshly severed, one's starting to go. What happens to dead bodies? Decompose, yeah. Various stages of decomposition. So we're talking about him because this story of Padmasambhava is a story about our lives as much as anything. Yeah, so sometimes when we talk about, we have the same sort of thing with the Buddha, where when we talk about the Buddha, we're talking about somebody who lived. So similar with Padmasambhava, as far as we know, he is somebody who lived. He's this person who brought Buddhism to Tibet. But his story, his life story, is kind of surrounded by images which are, I suppose, hard to believe literally. If you take them literally, they're hard to believe. I mean, it's even hard to believe that he looked like that particularly, or he carried around the sort of things that he's carrying around. So he's surrounded in these kind of symbols. Like Nyanavacha was saying, we need symbols, but we need more than symbols as well. We need stories, actually. We need myth. We need legend. So it's best to think of Padmasambhava as a legendary figure, because that starts to get at this kind of liminal space in between history, in between fact, and imagination. And that in that liminal space is where something that's much truer than history is, or at least something much more important than history, which is something that's true about our own lives, something that's always true about our own lives. So that's why we're exploring the figure of Padmasambhava and the story of how he brought Buddhism to Tibet this week. So today, what I'm going to talk about is, in a way, the context. Just going to talk about the context of Tibet before, directly before Padmasambhava was called upon. So, has anyone here been to Tibet? Oh, Philippe's been to Tibet, yeah. It's pretty inhospitable. I haven't been to Tibet, so maybe Philippe should tell us about Tibet. But as far as I understand, it's a pretty inhospitable place, yeah. So it's most, if not all of it, is kind of up in the mountains. It's a Himalayan country. that borders with India, and it's up very, very high in the mountains, so pretty much the whole thing is kind of covered by snow. And then if you imagine medieval Tibet as well, you've got something like, I don't know, I was trying to think of like an image of kind of a snowy, inhospitable place in medieval times, and the best I could come up with is like the wall in Game of Thrones. So you imagine the wall in Game of Thrones, but like even higher, and it's not even built up as much as the wall is. It's it's mountainous, it's rocky, but people are living there. But people still live there today, but people were living there back in the 8th century as well. So they were living there in this kind of inhospitable climate, this snowy, windy climate, and the King of Tibet, which we'll be coming back to later in the week, the King of Tibet wanted Buddhism to take hold in the land. At this point, we're talking quite a few hundred years after the Buddha had died, and the Buddhism had become a very popular religion in India, much more than it is today in India. And the King of Tibet had this idea that that's what his country needed. Basically, his country kind of needed the Dharma. So he was asking. He asked a monk called Santarakshita, not to be confused with Sangharakshita, who's the founder of our order. Certainly different. Sometimes you get this with Buddhist names, where they're very, very similar. So Santarakshita was this monk. So he was a monk, a Buddhist monk, and he is known for being a very sort of scholastic monk, so very sort of academic approach to Buddhism. He knew the Dharma really, really well. And when I say he knew the Dharma really well, he knew all the lists. He knew all of if you can imagine somebody who could recount the whole of the Buddhism Wikipedia page or something, that would be who Santarakshita would be. And so he was going around Tibet. He was teaching the Dharma, but it wasn't quite taking hold. So he started building these monasteries in Tibet. So these places to practice Buddhism. And what he did is he built these monasteries up in the daytime, as you do, and then something really interesting happened at nighttime. At nighttime, demons tore down the monasteries that he was building up. So he'd wake up in the morning and realise that these monasteries that he was trying to build had all been torn down by the demons of Tibet, these demons that lived there, the local demons who had obviously been there for much longer than he had, maybe much longer than kind of any humans had been. So this is kind of where I'm going to leave the story. I'm going to say a little bit more, but this is where we're leaving the story tonight. And so I'm going to sort of spend the rest of the time this evening unpacking that, what we've got so far of the story. So this image, I really love this image so firstly we've got Tibet, this really, really inhospitable climate, this windy, snowy land. this is an image for our mind, yeah? So our mind, our sort of blustery, blurry mind that, just we can barely kind of see through, basically, yeah? And we sort of know that we don't want to be living in this kind of mind. We don't want to be living in this mind that's so full of, that's so undeveloped, that's so cold at times, that's so, blurry, so unclear. Yeah, so we know we don't want to be living in this mind, this kind of mind that we have. So we have a good idea. We have a good idea. We're going to learn all about Buddhism. We're going to read all the books on Buddhism and find out what this is all about. We're going to learn how to meditate, even learn all the lists. And we set all of our good intentions. So on Saturday, when we launched the urban retreat, many of us here were here launching the urban retreat, and we were setting our intentions for the week. So we set our intentions in the light of the day. We built up our monastery. But then what so often happens with good intentions is at night time they get torn down. They get torn down by our demons, by these demons who, they come out at night, don't they? And I think this is the thing that I really wanted to explore this evening is, why do these demons come out at night? What is that about? Why do they only ever come out at night? Or why do they come out so much more often at night? So I was thinking about this. I was thinking about how, so many people I know have really, really struggled to get to sleep these days. It's really, really, I think insomnia is more and more common. It's really, really difficult to get to sleep at night. And, you could say, why is that the case? We know why, don't we? We know why we're struggling to get to sleep. It's because we're staring at this blue light device, the whole day. And I looked up the other day, I was thinking about this, and I looked up, I wonder how prevalent that is, actually. I found this research study that was asking people about phone use at night. And this study said that 9 out of 10 people use their phone just before they go to sleep. Just when they're in bed, just before they go to sleep. 9 out of 10 people now look at their phone the last thing at night. And I just found that so interesting because we know what the effect of that is. There's this won't be news to anyone. I don't need to tell you that, if you look at your phone the last thing before you go to sleep, it's going to keep you awake. It's going to give you the sort of same feelings as jet lag and everything else. There's even a big kind of market in blue light filtering glasses now, isn't there? Just so that we can do that. And I struggle with this as well. This is something that I really struggle with. This is why I kind of wanted to talk about it. Because I'll get into bed and I know this, and I've got really strong desire and motivation. I've dedicated my life to practicing Buddhism. I've got a really, really strong desire and wish to wake up every morning early and meditate. And not just wake up early, meditate bleary-eyed, but actually kind of wake up fresh enough to try and actually work with my mind. And then I get into bed and I think, right, okay, yeah, so I'll read a book to wind down. And then somehow I find my phone in my hand. I'm scrolling through Instagram, why am I doing that? And it's that moment just before that happens that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's that moment that it's where did that moment go? Like, where was that moment just that where I went from my good intentions about what I want to do with my life, my clarity and my sort of vision, even, like, to be a bit grandiose about it. When did that turn into, and I've now been scrolling on Instagram for about 45 minutes? like, where is that point, and what happened there? And in a way, it just is the turn of night, isn't it? So Dayanata led meditation earlier in the first half, and I really loved actually how Dayanata started the meditation. I don't know if you remember. He said, as soon as you close your eyes, you're confronted with your direct experience. And that's what happens when night comes, isn't it? As soon as everything goes dark, we're confronted with our direct experience. As soon as we remove all the sort of stimulus, all of the distractions of life, we're confronted with our direct experience. And then we push it away. Because our demons come up in that moment, don't they? Our demons come up. And these demons, they're not anything to sort of feel guilty about. They're not anything to feel like, we need to kind of kill. Like, there's this lots of kind of myths. Satchimanus was saying this at lunchtime, actually. I'm just copying everyone else, basically. Satchimanus was saying at lunchtime how, in a lot of Western myths about demons, we end up killing the demons. We try to kill the demons in the Western myths. In Eastern myths, that's not so true. We have a different relationship with demons. And we'll explore that more this week. But what's really interesting, I think, to look at is, what are these demons? Like, what is going on there in that moment? What are we wanting? Why have we been left so unsatisfied with our days that we now need to try and stimulate ourselves more at night? Why are we left so unsatisfied with our lives that we now need to stimulate ourselves more at night? And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, like, oh yeah, I mean, it's not just in the last it's not just since I've been practicing Buddhism and wanting to wake up at night that I've had demons at night time. Like, if you think about it, it's everywhere, isn't it? Like, if you go for a walk round town at night, particularly on the weekends, it's just a very different place, isn't it? It's a really, really different place. Like, people get drunk, they start, like, fighting and having sex, and like what, all of that happens at night time. It doesn't happen so much during the day. It happens a bit, but, like, maybe at festivals and things, but like, it doesn't happen so much during the day. So it's all of these kind of desires, these desires that are being pushed down the rest of the time, are being kind of ignored, are being that we're distracting ourselves from, all just come up when we then have some space at night. And so, in that moment when night comes, it's more than just, so Dayanata was also talking about desire, and so I'm talking about desire as well, coming up, in a way, the demon of unhealthy desire. But it's more than desire that comes up, isn't it? So when I went on my first solitary retreat at Vajrasana, which is a really brilliant place to do a first solitary retreat, it's very comfy in lots of ways. But the thing that I was really surprised by was that I was really scared of the dark. And I really, really wasn't expecting that. I've been outside before, like at night time, like lots. But somehow after a few days or going on a week on my own, somehow the nighttime got much more scary. I had this experience where it's a bit embarrassing actually, but a fly in my solitary hut came and died on my sort of tea light, on my candle, on my shrine. And after like 5 or 6 days of spent on my own for the first time ever, I was really moved. Really moved by the death of this fly. Oh my God, death is so important. I wanted to do something for this fly's dead body. And so I was like, I'll do a ritual for this fly. Because it was sat there on my candle, and I kept meditating and opening my eyes and seeing this dead fly there. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this ritual. And I was doing puja every night. And so I was like, what I'll do is I'll take this fly out and I'll bury it outside my hut in the dead of the night, and it'd be like really strong. So I did the whole thing. I had a mantra going, and I took it out. I went outside, and then the first thing I realised was I couldn't see anything. So because it was pitch black, I think it's partly I've been living in London all my life, and so nighttime is kind of a different thing in London, isn't it? You don't actually have real darkness in London. So I went outside and I was like, oh no, I actually can't see anything. So then I was like, I sort of, I didn't have a head torch with me or anything. So I had a lighter, and so I'm messing around with this lighter, and it's just more and more I was just getting terrified of the fact that I couldn't see more than a couple of feet in front of me, because it was just I was messing around with this lighter, and in the end I gave up. I didn't bury the fly. But it was just it really surprised me. It really surprised me. Why was I so scared of the dark? And it is. There is something about the dark which is scary. There's something about removing all distractions and being faced with our direct experience that is terrifying, and our demons will come up. So I'll cut to another retreat in my life that I want to talk about. Last spring, I was ordained in a place. Just after I was ordained, I went to a place where our ordination retreats happen in Spain, in the mountains in Spain, called Gucaloca. And what was amazing in Gucaloca was, it was dark at night, but there was a light as well. I had this hut that didn't have any curtains on it. It's a very, very basic life we lead when we're on retreat in Gucaloca. It's about an hour and a half from the nearest road, Gucaloca. So when you drive there, a taxi drops you off in one place, and then a big 4-wheel drive comes and picks you up and takes you the rest of the way up the mountain. And there's basically no electricity. There's a tiny bit of electricity from a solar panel, but it's basically no electricity. And we have these huts. One of these huts I was sleeping in that are built from this kind of local form of concrete. I watched a film actually about Gucaloca recently where they were building it, and they were saying how these huts are just like temporary structures, and they actually kind of caved in at one point when they were building it, and all the guys who were there, all the order members who were there building it, were like, okay, yeah, look, it's not going to last very long. Obviously, it's just caved in, but it'll be all right for a few years before we build something a bit more permanent. Yeah, that was about 30 years ago, and I slept in one last year. So we've not gone around to that yet. But anyway, so it's a really kind of basic lifestyle. And so I was sleeping in one of these huts, and I think a few of the other guys were kind of hanging up their clothes on the sort of window so that to sort of make a bit of a curtain. I decided not to kind of make a curtain. I decided to just have my window. I just had this really beautiful view of the rocks outside, the mountains. And one night I was woken up by the brightest light that I thought for sure someone had just come into my hut and turned the light on. It was like, it's so bright. But it was actually the moon. Like the moon was just like shining in straight through my window. And I'd been woken up, and then at that point, without kind of going into too much detail, I needed the loo, basically. At that point I got woken up and I needed the loo, so I went out of my hut. I had a head torch this time. And in Gukuloka, around, there's a really wild sort of terrain. I didn't see a demon, but I kind of might as well have. What there is in Gukuloka around this valley are these really large kind of boar. Yeah, they're probably about I think they're about 2 or 3 times the size of a person, and they only come out at night. So I was standing there having a wee, and I just heard this really loud noise of this boar. Anyway, I later sort of so that really stuck in my mind, like this, that there are these massive boar around, and I was trying to sort of avoid them. But it really stuck in my mind because later we were doing some work. We have these work days on these retreats as well, and we were rearranging. We were asked to rearrange all of these stones that had been put out to kind of mark the kind of paths and the gardens and stuff. And they were like, we have to do this really regularly. Rearrange all of these rocks. Because of the boar. They just come at night and just like move all of our rocks. So I just thought that was amazing. It was just like, I just thought, oh, right, okay. So, these demons that were breaking down the monastery, it's like, they're here. They're here in this valley. And I think it was particularly sort of thinking of that because when we go on these ordination retreats, we do live quite a monastic life. We live a very monastic life, actually. So for those of you who are new to the Buddhist Center and how we practice here, those of us who are ordained, we're not ordained as monks or nuns. We're ordained as Buddhists. And that doesn't mean, in a way, it's almost not quite true to say we're not monks or nuns, because we're not monks and we're not monks as well. we're something else. So when Sangharakshita founded our order, he was very he's been very kind of clear about this, is that we're doing something that's different to the divide between monk and lay Buddhists that exists elsewhere in the Buddhist world. And he was doing that because, or at least the way that it's kind of landed in my life, he was doing that because if you you could just go and become a monk, you could just kind of go and live off in the mountains with a shaved head and robes for all of your life. But something of you might get left out if you try and do that. Yeah. So if you try and do that, especially if you've been raised in the culture that we have, and we don't have that sort of kind of myth, very kind of deeply in our consciousness as we're kind of growing up, then it'll be very, very difficult to get all of us on board with that ideal. So much better to kind of say, actually, there's a part of me that wants to live in the world, and more than that, it's not just that you're kind of like deferring to that part that wants to live in the world. It's that there's a part of the world that sort of is me that needs me to not be in the mountain, if you see what I mean. So there's a part of the world that needs me to be practicing in it. So it's as much about that as not trying to suppress anything, I think. This idea of not being a monk and not a monk. So I'm saying that because I'm talking about this retreat being in quite monastic conditions, and then I'm talking about as well then coming back from that and trying to practice with the same vigour, the same dedication that we can practice, that I certainly found on my ordination retreat. So I want to talk a little bit what that looks like, because it's exactly what we're trying to do on the urban retreat, isn't it? We're trying to practice as if we're on retreat, in a way even more than being on retreat, as if we're sort of living a fully dedicated Buddhist life. That's what we're trying to do on the urban retreat. We're trying to work out how we can do that. So my one of the other kind of really, really big lasting images from my ordination retreat is this moment coming out of the shrine room in the morning, and I often was sitting on for a bit longer than the other guys. It's not a brag, but I would. need to say that for the story. I was sitting on for a bit longer than the other guys, and the breakfast bell would ring, and I'd come out from meditation. And the other guys were all sat there at breakfast, and I would come out, and after kind of months of being on retreat together and going through the same routine every day together, what you end up doing is sitting in the exact same place every day. So I ended up kind of going around, doing my same sort of routine, getting my porridge, and then going and sitting in the same place that I really liked, because the sun was like shining right in my face through the mountains. But the really, really lovely moment that I started to just really, really look forward to every day was this moment when another guy just sat across me. So we're in silence for long periods on this retreat, and every day we'd be having breakfast in silence at the very least. So we're in silence. I get my porridge. I go and sit down, and then the guy in front of me, who I've been ordained with, and this happened. This wasn't just one particular guy as well. This happened a few different times with different guys. Would pass me the peanut butter and the banana that they know I have in my porridge. And it's such a kind of, I don't know, small, inconsequential thing in a way. Like, doesn't really matter. You know, I could have reached it myself. Like, it doesn't really matter in a way. Or I could have, well, actually, I probably couldn't have reached them myself, but I would have asked. I would have had to ask if they hadn't have done that. But because I did it a few times, because they got to know my routine, they just started to go, actually, we know what Suryanaga wants in his porridge. He wants peanut butter and a banana. And they just started passing it to me. And that wasn't just for me. Obviously, that would be weird. It was happening quite a lot. People were just kind of... It was almost like we had just become one sort of unit or something. Like we were just so aware of each other and what we were doing and what we needed, that we would just do it without anybody having to even ask. And for me, that's a real kind of, it's just been a real kind of lasting image of what community looks like, of what real kind of community looks like. It's what living in community upstairs looks like so much for me. We don't, we do 1 meal in silence a week, but there's so much kind of awareness of what's going on in each other's lives all the time, so much kind of intertwinedness of our lives, that we are able, and of course we'll kind of fall short of this. I'm not saying we're kind of perfectly aware of each other all of the time, but living that sort of intertwined life means that we're able to kind of pass the peanut butter without somebody even having to ask. So that's what we're trying to build. That's what we're trying to build. Is when we say we're trying to build a monastery, that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a place to practice together. We're trying to build a place that we can dedicate ourselves to our highest potential. We're trying to build somewhere where we can take in our demons, and even, a place where the kind of light of the full moon will shine right through the curtain, and we're actually not scared to go out for a wee, even with like big giant boars everywhere. So that's what we're trying to do this week, and it's what the King of Tibet, what Santarakshita was trying to do in medieval Tibet. But they knew they needed something more. They knew they needed more than just ideas about practicing. They knew they needed more than just good intentions. They needed something or someone who was going to be able to actually work with those demons, to tame those demons. So that's what Satchimanas is going to be talking about tomorrow. He's going to be talking about how Padmasambhava comes to Tibet. So tonight what I wanted to do is finish by calling on Padmasambhava. So that's where we're leaving the story. We're leaving the story in a place where we need Padmasambhava to come and help us. We need Padmasambhava who is a being who is much more than that, represents something much more than our good intentions, represents our potential that goes far beyond that. So we're going to call on Padmasambhava by chanting the Padmasambhava mantra. And I think we've got enough time to make offerings as well. There's quite a lot of us in here though. So what I'd say about making offerings is that you will need to not queue. I know we really like queues in this country. I made that joke already in the team meeting actually. Just do it again. But yeah, just when you're making offerings, just come in droves. If there's any space, just come and make an offering. So we'll chant the Padmasambhava mantra, we'll make offerings, and then we'll allow the Padmasambhava mantra to die down. And then in silence, we can leave the room. Don't worry about putting the mats and the cushions away, because they need to be reset for the morning anyway. So in silence, we'll leave the room after the mantra dies down. Yeah.
Is it possible to make space?
Yeah, let's do that. Good point. See if you can fudge up to that. Maybe one or two people could come sit here. Yeah.
There's more space at the back there, maybe you can...
Oh yeah, and behind Kusvasara, there's some space.
There's a term called sleep revenge procrastination.
Oh really? Yeah.
That's what we do. I was literally reading it last night. Why people procrastinate?
Okay, great. So settle down into your meditation posture. As Dianata said earlier, as soon as we close our eyes, we're confronted with our direct experience. So in the darkness, the empty liminal space, we can wait for Padmasambhava. Om Ahung Vajraguru Padmasiddhihung. 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 Om Ahum Vajraguru Padmasiddhi Om. 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 Om Ahum Vajraguru Padmasiddhi Om.
Vajraguru Padmasambhava Om Ahum 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 Vajraguru Padmasambhava.
So leaving quietly when you're ready.